Welcome to Tree Talking Time, where we talk all things tree dogs. The smallest fights to the largest hounds, treating squirrels to bears and everything in between. And from time to time, we might even run a little fast game.
So what can I help guys understand Laikas? What do you think some of the basic questions or the thought process of guys that need help understanding
First of all,
the Laika breed?
Most people don't even know what they are. Like, I see
Right.
it all the time. You know, you post a picture, somebody else posts a picture of one, and they're like, what kind of dog is that? Is that a coyote or,
Yeah.
or is that a husky? And it's like, no, it's a Laika, So, kind of just give us a little. The other day, you gave me a nice little history of them and rundown of how they got
all right,
here.
So they actually obviously they're from Siberia,
mm-hmm.
and there's four major types. We have the West Siberian Laika.
Mm-hmm.
That's the biggest type that we have in the United States. There's the East Siberian. That's a little bit bigger Laika, size-wise. And I was just talking to Vladimir Baragovoy, who's the guy that actually brought them here to the U.S., the first breeding pairs.
Mm-hmm.
So I was just talking to Vladimir about the East Siberian Laikas the other day.
Okay.
You got the Carrillo Finnish, and they're a Laika, but the Carrillo Finnish has that red, almost like a Finnish Spitz, except for they're a little bigger.
Okay.
And then you have the Russian European Laika, and that's the black and white.
Yep.
They're smaller than the Curlian Bear Dog.
Interesting. I didn't know that.
So that's like the four major types, but most of us in the U.S. deal with the West.
Yeah.
That's the one that we mainly deal with, and all those are regional type dogs.
Mm-hmm.
The East Siberian Laika, they wanted them a little bigger, not only because they were a bigger dog. They're a little bigger dog because they had deeper snow in that area.
Okay.
They did work a little more big game, but they will work small game as well.
Mm-hmm.
But they would also pull a sled.
Gotcha. So they're multi-purpose.
Yeah.
Dog.
And the West Siberian Laika was out of two major branches of people in Russia. The Hantai and the Mansai people were the two major groups.
Okay.
And so later on, after World War II, and they wanted the professional fur traders at that time, they're professional hunters, to have this breed of dog that the Siberian people had for years, thousands of years. I want to say when I was talking to Vladimir, about 5,000, but don't quote me on that. They're at least well over 1,000. That I can say for sure.
Yeah.
So, anyways, when you're dealing with that, that kind of dog, that East Siberian, the West Siberian won't pull a sled. It's got too much brain drive.
Okay.
So that they need, it's a little bigger dog that will that's because of the area they were in.
Mm-hmm.
Most of us do hunt the West Siberian, and I've seen some people. I'm not going to, that said they're great small game dogs. They're a versatile dog that will hunt everything. Any Laika should hunt various types of game.
Yeah.
And what I was getting to, and I kind of got off track, was when they wanted them to come back in Russia for the professional hunters, is that the Soviets, their geneticists, dog geneticists, worked to bring this breed about after World War II because all the dogs were all, eaten or whatever. And so they went back into Siberia and rebred them.
Okay.
That also makes them really good. This isn't like when they redid them. It isn't like a bunch of backyard breeders breeding them. These are geneticists that were breeding. Yeah, they were professionals breeding dogs. And we're looking for the very, very best versatile dog to hunt with. And that's why they'll bay.
Okay.
Big game over there, and they're used heavily in Russia and Europe. And I have a harder time finding the versatile ones because they got more specialized for moose and bear and boar. And that's Eurasian bear, so they don't tree.
Yeah.
They don't go to tree.
Mm-hmm.
More like our grizzlies.
Yep. Now I follow quite a few guys from Europe that have them, and
most of them are hunting boar. I've got a lot of friends that
and bear, I think, are probably the two most common things I see personally.
Right. So when Vladimir brought them over, they were much more versatile and had a greater training ability. You have to be real careful when you import them. And I lost my good contacts to really have the good trained ones because we can't import from Russia or the Ukraine.
Yeah.
And there were some guys that I had over there that really still bred the versatile ones.
Mm-hmm.
And then, obviously I can't import from there. And the Ukraine is in Russia about no war. So it gets a little tough to find versatile Laikas like we have. And I have a few contacts in Norway. Why this group in Sweden contacted me yesterday, they did, because I hunt I do a lot of coon hunting with mine, just because of my job schedule.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
I hunt them on squirrel and coon and upland game.
Okay.
But the Swedish organization of the Laikas got a hold of me yesterday and asked me to write an article about hunting coon with Laikas. They wanted to know all about it because they saw my posts with their group.
Yeah.
And so now I got to write this article, and I was like, okay.
That'd be interesting.
So I told him I'd do it. I have a teaching background, so writing an article is not a big deal, and I don't mind doing it.
That's why I have you on here too. We want the education on these Laika dogs.
I don't know if I'm a genius by it. I just worked hard at it.
Well, hang on one second. We failed to mention who you are for all the listeners. So this is Darren Petty. And how long have you had Laikas?
I've only had them about 12 years.
Well, they've only been here for what, 25, 30 years?
Early 90s is when Vladimir brought them over.
So it's not like they've been here for a long stretch of time.
No. Occasional guy might have one from Russia, but not like a breeding pair like Vladimir brought in. Yeah. Guys like Eddie Hicks, who's in Arkansas, he bought some of the original Laikas in the U.S. And Eddie's, in my mind, one of the best Laika guys in America, by far. He's not a guy that's on any kind of internet or anything like that. He's just a hunter. Yeah. I mean, and he has outstanding Laikas. I wanted some of his blood, so I bought one here a couple years ago from it.
Now, what's he run his dogs on?
He mainly runs his dogs about predominantly on squirrel.
Okay.
That's pretty much it. Mm-hmm. He's got some that he'll run coon hunting, but not very often because it gets more trees and his schedule. He works like he's an older guy, so he works like 2 or 3 days a week, and then he'll hunt the rest of the week. So the biggest thing I would tell people about any Laika is this: and I grew up with hounds and beagles, and I went through fights, and I went through curs, and like I was telling you before, is the bonding with a Laika is extremely important.
Okay.
They want that it's a partnership with a hunt with them. Mm-hmm. And that bond is, they'll hunt their guts off. They're not a good dog. And I just had a conversation with Vladimir yesterday. He said people get frustrated with them because they think they can put them in the kennel like a hound all year and then get them out and hunt them.
Yeah.
And they don't do well that way.
That kind of surprises me.
Time. Because the people over there in Siberian area, they were part of the community. Now, obviously, if they didn't make a dog, they made them into a coat. If you didn't make the grade, you weren't going to be sitting around. Mm-hmm. But they don't do well with that.
Just in some senses, a lot of your primitive breeds have kind of been established on like the outskirts of human civilization. So a lot of times, they're not necessarily the most people-pleasing type breed. You take like a New Guinea singing dog or a Basenji for an example.
Exactly.
And neither breed are a people pleaser. They're kind of like, oh yeah, you exist, you feed me, okay, great. But they can kind of take it or leave it.
Yeah, with them, it's that relationship.
Interesting.
And here's a really good example that I can tell you from firsthand experience. So I was down to just my one Laika. She was bred, and a buddy of mine said, Dave Wood in Michigan. Dave said, Darren, I have a really good male, and why don't you come get him and hunt him? And I read this. Vladimir wrote about it. If you think you want any Laika, please do yourself the favor and get Hunting Laika Breeds of Russia on Amazon by Vladimir Beregovoy. It'll save you a lot of trouble whether you want one or not. But anyways, he wrote about this fact, you just can't go grab a Laika, a lot of these. You can't go grab them and go hunt your buddy's dog because they won't hunt.
Yeah.
And I went up there and picked up my buddy's Laika and had it for 2 days and took it out. That dog would not hunt a lick. He would stand there and look at me, so I called Dave and he said, "Man, how's that dog working out?" "Man, he won't hunt." He's like, "What?" And I said, Vladimir wrote about this.
Yeah.
It took 30 days before that dog would hunt for me. And I just kept spending more and more time with him every day.
Mm-hmm.
About 30 days, I killed limits of squirrels with him until I took him back to Dave's house.
So it's kind of similar to, a lot of curs and feists can kind of be like that too.
Curs and feists can be that way too.
Actually, I had a cur dog like that, best dog I've ever actually owned. And but when I got her, a friend of mine had trialed her for me because he lives in Ohio and he knew the guy that had the dog, and I was going to go out there in a few weeks. So he trialed her with the guy that had her. She did everything the guy said. I said, "Okay, buy her." I go out there to pick her up. Wouldn't hunt a lick for me. Well, she would hunt, but it was like slick treeing. It's hard to catch. Just doing stupid stuff.
Right.
And like you said, it took about a month. And after about a month, me and her, we were good.
Yeah, I've had several. Kilby's one that's lasted the longest, and she's a Ukrainian import from Igor Plavsky, and he now lives in California. Mm-hmm. So she's sitting here at 11, sitting on her dog bed, looking at me. I picked her up. A guy had her because somebody bought her to be a pet. Well, she'd break out of the windows trying to get the squirrel in the yard, so the lady rehomed her. And the guy that had her lived in Colorado, and he said, "She's more dog than I can handle." Mm-hmm. And I said, "Does she tree?" And he sent me videos, and she was treeing yard squirrels. I said, "I'll drive out and get her." He said, "I'll give her to you if you want her." I was like, "Send me some pictures, some videos of this dog treeing."
Yeah.
And she was not quite 2. And I went out there, and I had to fix some things, like she would run 1,000 yards, and we don't want squirrel dog. I don't, maybe some guys do for competition hunting, curs or something. But if you're just a hunter, you don't really want your dog running 1,000 yards, and so I had to fix some things. Then got her coon hunting, and she's to this day still. When I'm introducing them to upland game birds, and they're very good at it. What I do is I just take them to those places where they release birds. They'll put the birds out.
Yeah. And
I just start, because most of us tone train our dogs.
Mm-hmm.
So I just tone them and tell them, find a bird, and they put the birds where you want them. Yeah. So then they'll smell it, they'll get gamey, and they'll flush that bird. You shoot anything to these dogs. That's why I tell people. And when you talk to my European counterparts or Russian counterparts, they always tell you, if you don't want that dog to hunt it, don't shoot it, because if you do, it will hunt it. So, like, I don't shoot out possums even if it's the first thing the dog trees. I'll just lead them away. As soon as I shot those pheasants to those dogs, her and Ivan were my first pair. They would bird hunt.
Yeah.
And we'd hit the fields, and I hunted wild birds with them. They'd shorten their distance. They would find birds, flush birds. They were pretty good about bringing birds back.
So are they just a flushing dog then?
Yeah, they're a flushing. They're not a pointing.
Okay.
So they would flush. You'd shoot the bird. They were pretty good about naturally bringing them back. Ivan would eat the head. I'd have to get after him about quail. Pheasants, he wouldn't do that. Quail, he's like, I think I'll take the head off that one. Now, if they're like release birds and you miss them, that Laika will stay with that bird and force that bird to go to tree.
Really?
And will tree it.
Interesting.
Because they hunt Laikas and finished spits heavily on grouse and capercaillie. And the capercaillie is the size of a small turkey. It's a very large grouse. So they hunt finished spits, Norbotten spits, and Laikas will tree those game birds.
What do those birds look
So,
like?
they're a dark colored bird. Capercaillies are very dark colored, beautiful bird. Like a blackish brown.
Mm-hmm.
They got the males have like a red around the bottom of the throat.
Okay.
They're really really pretty, and they've got big grouse over there too. And I've had friends that these dogs will tree rough grouse.
I was always curious what those birds were. Like I said, I follow a couple of different people in Europe that hunt with Laikas or some sort of Spitz or elk hound or something like that, and I've seen those birds. I just had no idea what they were.
Right, they're capercaillie, and they do hunt those. So it's real natural for them to push that bird and tree it.
Hmm.
And with each species of game, the dog will tree differently by the breed standard and the way they were bred. Grouse, a Laika doesn't tree as hard, where a Spitz gets graded on how many barks per minute.
Okay.
That they bark on a grouse, it's a little different because they bark a lot more.
Mm-hmm.
A guy wants a heavy duty tree dog gets get a Norbotten or a Finnish Spitz because they tree hard.
Interesting.
Because they get judged on that. A Laika will just bark enough for you to get there on a grouse. They'll bark a little more on a squirrel. They bark heavier on a coon, and then I've got friends that Alex. And I can't say Alex's Russian name, last name.
I didn't even try. I was like, this is Alex. And I said, you can say your last name.
Yeah. Alex is a big-time bear hunting his Laikas.
Yeah.
Now, they tree those really hard. The bigger the game, the harder they tree.
Mm-hmm.
The more aggressive the bark is. So, like coon hunting, my dogs bark more. They bark harder than they do on squirrels.
Yeah. Funny thing.
And I've learned I've made some mistakes on buying some professional hunters from Russia because they'll bark 5 or 6 barks because they don't want them to chase that game off because it spurs money.
Yeah.
And so 5 or 6 barks, and I think I was telling you that the other day, and that would be it. That dog would bark 5 or 6 barks. You'd have to follow him on the GPS. The squirrel or the coon would be there every time. If it changed trees, he'd bark 5 or 6 barks. Drove me nuts. I mean, I'm still like to hear a tree dog. I don't want to have to use my GPS to find you.
Yep.
But that's what they wanted.
Okay.
So when I called Vladimir, he told me.
Sense.
He said, "Yeah, I mean, because the less if you start thinking about the heart of the tree dog, a lot of times that pushes that squirrels, especially gray squirrels, they'll get going.
Yeah.
And that's the other thing about them with their treeing style that they grade on their diplomas in Russia because they have diplomas for their hunting diplomas. They're looking for that dog not to ever put its feet on the tree. That's not a proper treeing style because they don't want to spook the game.
Okay.
That dog should be looking at the game, either sitting or standing and watching the game. Gotcha. That's what they're looking for. And that they get downgraded on their diploma because 1 is the highest diploma, then 2, then 3.
I've heard that they're a little looser, like they tend to be back, they tend to be watching, but I never realized that was such a that they were graded on it, and it was something that was really bred for.
Yes, that's what they're looking for. They're definitely looking for that. And I've heard Igor somebody put a post of their dog treeing over in Russia somewhere, and he was like, they were making a big deal because the dog was treeing, and he goes, hopefully the dog outgrows feet on tree bad. I mean, not proper style or something of that nature, what Igor said.
Yeah.
Because when he was talking to the person, of course, then they start talking in Russian, and it wasn't real nice. They were having a pretty heated debate. Translator doesn't work real good on that stuff. I couldn't follow it all. But that's something they look for. And if you've seen any of Alex's dogs pre-bear, they're not on the tree. They're usually sitting at the bottom of the tree watching that bear.
Yeah. Now, the only time I saw the one dog on the tree was the bear was coming down and she was trying to get it.
Yeah, I mean, then they'll get up there a little bit to push that bear back up. And they just did a big hunt in West Virginia. Jake McDonald brought one of his dogs down. Pam Spank, who's in Michigan, with Flint, and she has one of the pups from Kilby's last litter, Ember. And they joined Alex in West Virginia. Mm-hmm. They killed one bear, and and then they had this other thing that they did that it kind of surprised me, and I'll explain why it surprised me. They had jumped a coyote, and there was 5 dogs running, and they ran that coyote down and caught it and killed it. The reason why it surprised me is something that Vladimir wrote and had talked to me about, because I had noticed with my first Laikas that if there were coyotes in the vicinity, they'd quit hunting and come back. And I asked him, I said, what's going on? He said, because dumb Laikas that did not understand to stay away from large predators become wolf poop in Siberia.
Yeah.
So I was kind of surprised, that the dog actually did that, because my first Laikas, if they smelled a coyote, they come back. And Kilby's 11, I was out in Missouri last year, and we were hunting, and it's legal to road hunt there. And we were roading her, and she kept trying to get back in the truck. And I was like, and all my dogs are trained that if I open that door, they just jump in.
Yeah.
So that way I don't have to ever worry about them getting hit.
Mm-hmm.
So she's trying to get back in the truck, and I'm like getting annoyed. So I finally just catch her up, and I'm like, what the heck's going on? We're coon hunting. We go around the edge, and about 7 coyotes start barking.
Wow.
Going nuts. And they were probably 50 yards off the road.
So she knew.
That dog wouldn't hunt. She knew. Mm-hmm. And that was fascinating to me, that dog, and some dogs are naturally, afraid, but, that was why I got out of Feist. Not that there's anything wrong with a Feist dog, is we have a lot of coyotes, and I like to hunt at night, and that's not a good scenario.
Yep.
Not saying they can't treat coons. They can. They're fine dogs. I just need a little bigger dog that was, and then to find out they were a little wary of them made it even better.
Yeah, definitely. You got bad coyote problems.
Because we all have had friends that have had even cur dogs tackled by coyotes.
Yeah. Now, last year I had a pair of coyotes come in on 2 of my hounds. Luckily, I happened to be between them, and I deterred them from coming all the way in. But they were going to come in and fight my dogs off a tree.
Yeah, I mean we all know that happens, and the bigger the pack, and the more that makes them bolder.
Oh yeah,
that makes them bolder. Mm-hmm. So, and that's one of the things that I found very fascinating about the West Siberian Laika, or any of the Laikas. I've never fooled with anything but the West.
Yeah,
I've never hunted a Karelian. Russian European Laika. They're smaller than the West or the East or the Karelian.
Okay.
The Russo finish.
Yeah.
And the Russo finish Laika is a reddish color.
Okay.
Like the finish spits, except for a little bit. So I've never hunted any of those 3 breeds.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. The only personal experience I ever had with any sort of Laika breed is actually a Karelian, and a neighbor had one growing up, and it was, they got it from some rescue. It had been abused, and she was wary of strangers, and they didn't hunt her or anything.
Yeah, they're a little pricklier. They used to be a decent hunting dog, and they become, and like a lot of dogs, they became a dog that people wanted.
Yep.
Because they're neat, and they've kind of been messed up a little bit. Now, I occasionally get calls where people ask me, man, I had a Karelian, and some guys several years ago had Karelian bear dogs that were really good hunting dogs, really good squirrel dogs.
Yeah.
And I just had a guy talk to me a couple weeks ago, and I said, I know a lady in Alaska that has some pretty good ones that she wants them a little gamier because they keep the bears and moose out of the yard, and they will treat squirrels. Mm-hmm. I said, you'll have to ask her if she has any. It's now pretty popular. I don't want to say popular, but that with Karelians, there's groups that raise them to use to chase off bears for bear deterrence.
Yep, bear hazings.
Yeah.
I remember, I think it was National Geographic that had a big article on them, 10 years ago.
Right. And there's different groups that are raising that they got a little more hatred of bears, but they're so dang expensive. I mean, they're so costly. And I tell guys, I go, so now guys in Alaska are starting to not import, but bring West Siberian Laikas up to Alaska because it's cheaper to buy a Laika than a Karelian bear dog. And they'll do the same thing.
Oh, yeah.
It's just, you might pay $400, $500 for a West Siberian Laika pup, where you're paying anywhere from $1,200 to $2,500 for a Karelian bear dog pup.
Didn't realize Karelians
and that doesn't
brought so much money.
So, they're like, why am I going to do that? And so one guy that's doing it in Alaska, I've talked to him a couple of times. He's selling his Laika pups for $1,000 up in Alaska to do. I'm like, gosh, killing us, guys. You're killing our breed. I don't even. If they called me, I'd probably sit down. I won't sell you a dog. You're not going to hunt it. I mean, I'm so picky anymore. I go through people. I mean, you have people when you're dealing with a breed like this, and I'm working on obedience because I have like I was saying earlier, I've got a lot of knowledge on obedience training dogs. So all the dogs that I ever work with, especially I had one that was 6 months old and had some issues with. This is a breed that when they're puppies, you need to socialize a lot.
Yeah.
With dogs and people, because they can be funny. I mean, they can get grouchy anyways because they're not a big fan of strange dogs. Okay. And you have to really work on that. And strange people if you don't have a lot of hands on.
Yeah.
So I've taken this dog in the store because every pet dog I work with, and if I'm training a dog for obedience, has to go in the store and do all its commands.
Yeah.
He'll sit down, stay, come, all that. Ignore people in the store, all that. So everybody wanted to ask me, oh, man, you got a husky. No, it's not. Are you a breeder? I go, I do not sell these dogs unless you are a serious hunter with a background check, just so they leave me alone.
Oh, yeah.
Because I don't want you buying a West Siberian Laika and ruin the breed. We've got enough proof of pet people and what they do with breeds.
Unfortunately.
We've seen a lot of really good breeds destroyed, whether it's the Golden Retriever, whether it's the Lab, Irish Setters. Yep. I mean, you might not be familiar, but some of your listeners might be. One of my dad's best friends, Mike Rafe, longtime English coonhound hunter, had world champions. And Mike Rafe was a bird dog hunter, and he had Irish Setters when he was a kid because they were so good.
Yeah.
And he said they became popular, and, you couldn't give me an Irish Setter. And I've trained 6 or 7 of them. I've trained 6 or 7 Irish Setters, and they were okay, but they're not what they were bred to be.
Oh, yeah.
They're not. So I don't want them to have mine.
Even the field bred dogs anymore, they've moved away. They don't even call them Irish Setters. They call them Red Setters.
Yeah, they'll call them Red Setters. Red and White Setters. My vet, David Morgan here in Indianapolis, a big bird dog guy. Great vet to have because when you're taking your dog to the vet, you're a hunting dog guy in an urban area like I am in Indianapolis. They see your dog and they think you're starving it, just because it's in shape and it's not 20 pounds overweight.
Yep.
That's why I went to Dave, because he's a bird dog guy, and they never say my dog's fat. My dogs are too thin,
Yep.
Because you run into that.
Oh, yeah, unfortunately. Like you said, they're used to seeing obese dogs.
Yeah, they're not used to seeing it, in urban areas like I'm in Indianapolis. They're not used to seeing a conditioned dog.
Yeah.
And you're a hunter, so it's always, they're looking at you, and I'm like, you're going to lab. That's what that dog was supposed to do, and I can't help you on your couch.
Yeah.
So, but as far as how, I'm not a big guy with Laikas on caged game.
Okay.
When I'm working a Laika pup, what I usually do is I take them, if you live in the country, it's even better, but because it's 45 minutes to an hour for me to get somewhere to hunt, just because of where I'm at right now in my career and my wife's career, I take them to the city park and I put them on a long line, a 50-foot leash. And I will just, because it says in the park they have to be on a leash. They didn't tell me how long it was.
Yep.
And I'll find those city squirrels, and I'll hold that pup, and and I'll let that pup get all excited, and I'll let that leash go because it's 15 foot long, and I'll just keep doing that, and then that pup will start training. If it barks 2 or 3 times,
I've thought about doing that.
If it barks 2 or 3 times, we're done and we're going to the woods.
Yeah.
And then I just start walking them in the woods.
No, I've always thought about doing that. I always thought that was a great, especially for a squirrel dog. It's like, where can you go if there's just squirrels everywhere? You go to a park.
Everywhere, and they're dumb. You can get fairly close. You know, it doesn't matter what breed of dog it is. If you want to start a squirrel dog and get it barking a little bit, you can see 8 or 10 in 20 minutes.
Exactly.
So that's how I kind of do it where I'm at.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I've done it differently when I lived in the country. I would take them in areas that I knew there were a lot of squirrels with short trees. Not so that the short trees to that young dog, they're kind of like a feist in the sense that they start with their eyes and ears.
Yep.
The nose comes later.
Okay.
You know, like a cur dog, it's got, you know, a lot of curs have a little bit of hound in them. So, or bird dog. So their nose comes a little faster, whether it's tracking or whatever.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of guys like a little bit of bird dog in their cur dogs because of the winding ability.
Mm-hmm.
A misnomer that people will say about Laikas and Spits is this. They'll say they just use their eyes. No, they don't. A good Laika, and it's called chuto in Russian. It means eyes, ears, and nose.
Okay.
That's what they're looking for.
So they want a dog that'll do everything.
All 3 senses, like any squirrel dog guy would want. You know, you want them to use all 3 senses. That's what they were looking for. And so they do start with their eyes and their ears. Anything that moves, they hear it. They're anything that moves. They hear it in the woods and they'll go check it out. But once they get going pretty decently, they start using their nose, and they have phenomenal winding ability.
Gotcha.
People don't realize how good they can wind. In a lot of areas that I coon hunt in, I've had 13 orthopedic surgeries and a replaced knee. I'm not doing a lot of walking like I used to. So
definitely.
I'll road that dog, and I'm roading coon hunting.
Okay.
They can't see that coon.
Yeah.
They'll wind it. I've had them carry a track 200, 250 yards and tree the coon. 350, 400 is the most.
Okay.
So they didn't see that coon. I'm not saying they winded that coon 350, 400 yards. I'm saying they winded that coon in the woods and carried that track that far.
Mm-hmm.
Not with their nose down. They typically run with their head up.
Now, when they're running a track, I'm going to assume they're probably quiet. They're not saying much.
They don't bark on track. That's a fault if they do.
I kind of figured, but
yeah, I mean they're a silent mouth dog.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's why Alex has so much success with his bear dog. Isn't just because Alex puts in the time. He has great dogs.
Yeah,
but you wouldn't want to do it in an area where there aren't a lot of bears because that requires a cold nosed dog to dig out that 8-hour track, and that's not their gig.
Yeah.
But he gets in an area where they're a mile away or so, and they'll pick that track up, and they aren't barking. So before that bear knows it, they're on them.
Mm-hmm. He told me most of his races are real short.
Shorter, yeah, they're a shorter race. They, like I was telling you, they had that West Virginia hunt, and they just one of the bears went in a small cave, and Pam Spink went in there, and I didn't, it's not my picture, so I didn't post it anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
Pam actually crawled in the cave where you see her legs. She's the smallest person there. Pam probably weighs 128 pounds. You can see her leg, and you're like, that's a small cave,
Yeah.
And Pam goes in there and shoots the bear at like 3 or 4 feet.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's intense.
And then they get the bear out. So kudos to Pam, because I don't know if I'm crawling in a cave with a bear.
Yeah.
The dogs had baited in that cave, and she went in there and shot the bear. And it was a big sow, and that sow had a collar on her and tag. She was a 9-year-old sow, and they had a bunch of very interesting facts. She never left that area her whole life.
Very
so they had a lot of really good, interesting stuff on that.
Yeah. Now, I think that's the coolest thing about when you kill a collared animal. It's like you get all those data points You find out all that information that most people you never know.
Right. You don't know, and just like when you're a duck hunter or a goose hunter, and you shoot that banded bird. I shot a banded goose with my buddy who's a big duck and goose hunter, and the goose was from like Maryland.
Yeah.
Like, dang, I'm in Indiana, man. That's pretty cool. That's where that goose was from. So that was pretty neat. I've had my Laikas trail. Indiana, we are not allowed to hunt bobcats. I am not purposely hunting bobcats with my Laikas.
Yeah.
They tree bobcats. If it's fairly close, like anytime you're coon hunting, and you guys that have treed bobcats know this, they usually bail out on you, like before you get there every time. I've had some where they've popped them up, and I've gotten in there and got some great pictures of my Laikas treeing bobcats.
Awesome.
Yeah. If they tree that bobcat and it bails out 3 times, I just tone them back because I know I'm going to be chasing that bobcat all night long. And I usually know what it is that happened the other night. I could hear my older female is 11. She's treeing, but it's just not the tree that I know the way she trees on coon. I'm like, what the heck? And then all of a sudden I get about there and she leaves. Yeah. And then she trees again. Well, she's 11 years old. It bailed out the 3rd time. She's coming back to me and said, I'm tired. I'm not chasing that dang cat all night long. And so I knew exactly what happened.
Now, would you say most Laikas are pretty close hunting dogs when you're walk hunting?
They'll fool you because a lot, obviously I don't want a real long range dog in Indiana when I'm hunting because you get on private ground.
Yeah.
So squirrel hunting 250, 300, coon hunting 5 or 6.
Okay.
But like they will go further than we let them hunt. The guys that are hunting moose and in Russia and Europe, a mile or 2.
Oh wow.
Yeah, they will get going. If they want that dog to go find that moose, and they will get going. And if you've never watched a video of them working a moose, it's extremely fascinating.
Oh yeah, no.
If you've watched one, you know what I'm talking about. I mean, they just bark enough to keep that moose. They don't spook the moose. They don't put too much pressure on it, and they don't shoot that moose unless it's one they want to shoot.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if you've watched over there and they shoot moose. They shoot more cows and calves than we do.
Yeah.
You don't see as many bulls that they shoot. I don't know. I never really asked them why, but I don't know if they just. But if you see that, you start to see that they don't shoot as many bulls.
Mm-hmm. No, I've noticed that.
I don't know what the rules are, and I never really ask them, but I've noticed that, because I follow these guys all over the world, just like a lot of them do, and so I noticed that they do shoot. I don't know what the rules are or what. They're dog guys. That's I don't care. If I lived down south, I'd have running hounds. So I don't like to set. I don't like to set in the blind or the stand that much. I mean, I'll shoot a deer or 2 a year.
Yeah.
And my son and I go out, and if he shoots a deer, I shoot a deer. I'm a big air rifle guy, so now in Indiana we can hunt with air rifles.
Okay.
So it's a lot more fascinating to me to hunt with an air rifle. I bought the Air Force Texan SS 457. It shoots a 45 caliber slug.
Them air rifles have come leaps and bounds over the last few years.
For the first, and I did this for a long time. I carry a 25 caliber Benjamin Marauder, and coon hunting or squirrel hunting, and and coon hunt with it. I had to go send it to get stripped down because air rifles are heavy.
Okay.
They're a heavy gun, and you're shooting a 25 caliber. You get some bull pups, but they don't have the same velocity. When you're talking about shooting out a coon, I mean, you got to make a really solid head shot.
Okay.
But I shot a lot of coon with my Benjamin Marauder air rifle, and I do like the 25 caliber for squirrels even. And the reason being is, and I try to explain this to air rifle guys. They're always, air rifle guys can be weird, especially overseas. You're like, they're like shooting squirrels in the backyard, and they're like, well, I can shoot so many meters. I'm like, you're sitting on your back porch with a bipod or a tripod.
Yeah.
I'm trying to hold my rifle. I'm trying to hold this air rifle, and I might have a headshot, and I might have behind the shoulder shot, because I was talking about I wasn't real happy with the Benjamin Marauder come out with a semi-automatic 22 caliber air rifle.
Okay.
It just didn't have the knockdown power squirrel hunting, even though it'll put them out as fast as you can pull the trigger.
Interesting.
I mean, it'll put them out there, but I we aren't guaranteed when we're squirrel dogging that we're going to get that headshot that we want.
Oh yeah.
You might have to shoot behind the front leg or something. That's why I like the 25. The 22 just didn't have out of the Benjamin Marauder semi-automatic. You get something like an FX or something, it would be definitely more powerful
okay.
And but I like that stuff. That's the only reason why I'd be I'm a little more interested in deer hunting in Indiana, because I can hunt with an air rifle.
Yeah. Now like you said, I've went and deer hunted with some running dogs before. That was a different experience. It was pretty cool though.
Oh, like me, if I live down south, and I've never done it, I have no idea. I mean, I know it's about like running coyotes, where you got to go around and cut them off.
Mm-hmm.
You're not going to walk around and cut off a deer, and they're going to make a big circle. From just what my buddies tell me, I don't really know that much. You've done it, so you know more about it than I do. But
the days that I went, we had a lot of people. So basically, they just put a lot of guys sit in a stand, on a power line or on a cutover or something. They have
where you can see them coming. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's kind of the way they did it. Was we were sitting in different stands, and then they come through and they turn dogs loose. So
right. But talking about the Laikas, hey, definitely, like I was saying before, if you think you want one, if you get on the United Laika Hunters Association page on Facebook or any of those Laika pages,
mm-hmm.
Make sure it's a hunting group.
Yeah, definitely.
There's a couple of them that aren't, but and you can always message me. It's just Darren Petty. Just message me on Facebook. I will if you want to know anything about them. It's not that I'm an expert, but I can dang sure probably tell you, because there's not 1,000 of us out there. There's a couple hundred, and I probably know somebody in your area that you go see those dogs work. And I would recommend you do that, because it might not suit you. And that's okay.
Oh yeah, they're definitely a little different, but for certain people, I mean, they seem to definitely work.
You can run them in breeding pairs or dogs that are used to each other, but if you roll up with your buddy and he's got 2 or 3 dogs and you throw them out, there's a lot of them that won't put up with that.
Yeah.
I mean, they're more wolf-like and pack-like in that mentality.
Okay.
They can be grouchy.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Pam talked about her dog Ember, who's from my female. Her and Alex's female did not get along, and they had to put her up because she just didn't like her.
Yeah.
That's a strange dog, and for whatever reason, same sex is usually can be an issue.
Yep.
And Kilby used to be that way, but I'm a dog trainer, so there's a million dogs here all the time, and the older she got, she just got used to different dogs being here.
Yeah.
So, you got to do that socialization aspect on them and understand them that big game, they do run 2 or 3. You'll see them, but they're usually dogs from the same group. And you've probably seen that with the guys running boar. They'll have 3 or 4 Laikas working a boar.
Yeah.
If you're down south and you want to go see, if you're around the Louisiana area, if you want to go on a hog, see them work a hog, get over to Adam View. He has a Laika that I bought from Igor Kovarsky that preferred big game. Slower, mature, you just start treeing it too. And if they aren't treeing by a year, I'm so finicky. It's ridiculous. So I got really spoiled, because my first Laika treed at like 13, 14 weeks old, and timbered the squirrel. And then Kilby was so great that sometimes I'm too finicky. But
the good ones spoil you.
The good ones will run you, especially if that's your first 2 or 3, and then you're like in bad shape. But it's from Igor Kovarsky's, and I noticed that when I went out to Missouri, he would we'd get around hog sign, and he was more fired up. And so I sold him to Adam, and Adam, the first time went out, killed 2 or 3 hogs with him. And
Nice.
he has a looser bang style, which means they live a little longer. If you've got a rough hog dog, if you've been around hog dogs, rough ones don't live long.
Yeah.
They have a tendency. But, the dog, he's a bigger Laika. He's like 70 pounds. That's big for a West Siberian. I kind of wonder, and I talked to Vladimir about this, and he said they started breeding a bigger Laika, which actually is not smart because they're not as quick and agile working big game as they should be. 35 to 45 is a good working range.
Okay.
And you'll see the guys in down south, they like that 30 to 35 pound Laika.
Yeah.
They want that smaller Laika. Up here, I do like a little bigger one just because we got coyotes.
Yep.
So, any questions for me?
No, I think you've covered a lot of it. I really
I
appreciate
mean, to yap your head off. I've enjoyed talking dogs.
Yeah, definitely.
So, if you guys want, if anybody are listening to your podcast, just send me a message. And if you want to go see one work, and I might know somebody in that area, I'll point you to them. I'll try to answer your questions, but I'll probably tell you before you buy one, get Vladimir's book.
Yeah.
He's 85 years old. He's just a wealth of knowledge because he hunted them in Siberia. I mean, Vladimir has a doctorate in syntology or something like that, and that's like the study of animals or something. I couldn't even begin to tell you. I mean, he was a professor in the Soviet Union and then immigrated to the U.S. He was a professor at Oklahoma State, North Dakota State, and different. So he's such a wealth of knowledge and he's 85 and he just now lost his license because he had an accident. Those kids said he couldn't drive anymore.
Yeah, that's awesome.
But, we're going to lose this wealth of knowledge that actually hunted with them in Siberia.
Yeah.
There's none of the rest of us that can say that we hunted in the area they're from.
At least he was smart enough to write a book and try to capture some of that knowledge. A lot of times that kind of knowledge gets lost. But luckily, he wrote the book.
And he's written, I mean, he's like world renowned for his articles on ancient breeds anyway. He's written for organizations on, ancient breeds. I mean, he's just a really neat guy to talk to. You're almost better if you can't wade through the thick Russian accent to send him a message because it's a lot easier to understand him. Yeah. I can kind of wade through because I have a long wrestling background, so I've been around a lot of Russians in my life, so I can kind of wade through it. But I'm going to go run dogs, guys. I'm going to go run my dogs on too. Yep. So all of you, such a pleasure talking to you, buddy.
Thank you for joining me, and like I said, good luck tonight. You can find me on Facebook and Instagram at Tree Talking Media. And until next time, keep them talking in the timber.